It's a great start to the morning. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Sure.
I'd love to know about your early days. What made Jill, Jill, whether it's your parents, someone that mentored you, an incident that happened that set you on your path to where you are now.
Hmm. I think we were big readers. My
Yes,
mom took my sister and I to the library every Saturday, and
yes.
our there's a super small town library, and but our the librarian got to know the books that we were reading, the
Mm.
things that we liked, and she would set them aside. And so I was, by the time I was 10, 11, 12, reading the same books that my mom was reading. And so we would like swap books back and forth, and my sister's a couple years younger. And so by the time, I was 14 and she was 12, all three of us were reading all of the same books, and we would just pass all of the books around. And so I think that really was a big influence for me. And even my teachers in school, I would get caught reading my novels behind my textbooks, and my English teacher she would just tap me on the shoulder. I never got in trouble. She would just tap me on my shoulder. And when I graduated from high school, she gave me a journal that said, "Don't forget, being a bookworm is cool." And so I think that part of it was, just learning about the different, reading just opens up. I grew up in a really small town, rural. And so I was reading about places that I never thought that I would ever be able to see. And so I
Yes.
think that was a lot of where things came from. Decent student in school, didn't really have to try too hard, which in hindsight, I should have tried harder, because when I got to college, then I didn't really try hard and I left. And so I didn't actually get my bachelor's degree. And I went back to school in my late 30s after I'd gotten married and had kids, and got went back to school again and got my bachelor's degree and then my master's degree
Masters.
um,
Yeah, I saw that.
after that. So it was, a little bit of a winding path there.
And when you actually were going through these books, did you see a jump between fiction, non-fiction, or did you find it was more about keeping pace with your sister and your mum, and you lost track of what book you were reading?
I typically would read not fiction mainly. A
Yep.
lot of it back then was like some of the romance stuff. My mom and my sister were really into thrillers. They weren't my cup of tea, but I would read some of those as well, just because. And I still, to this day, when I am reading a book, I totally blank out on everything else that's happening around me. Like
Mm.
my husband, my kids can be talking to me, and I'm so ingrained and absorbed in the book, I don't even hear anything. So they just really draw me into those different, the different places. I love historical fiction, is one of my
Yes.
favorites. Just learning some of that, and I think I've passed a little bit of that on to my son. Really likes history as well, and so we can, and Greek mythology and some of those things, we can have a lot of those discussions and stuff. But just kind of would draw me in, and I just kind of fall into those worlds.
Do you find a lot of the stories that we read about actually occur in real life, that you can take that sort of tip or that solution from the book and apply it to the real world, and they go like, where did she get this wisdom from? Who is this person? She's lived 1,000 lives. You go,
Yeah.
actually, it was in the book.
It was in a book, yes. I've started now. I read on my device fiction, and then I listen to nonfiction books. So I'm pulling a little bit from both. I like autobiographies a lot, so I'll
Mhm.
listen to those a lot, and then more kind of nonfiction leadership type books, that kind of things. I will listen to those, and then I actually then buy the physical book, because I like to be able to go back and then read it, listen to it, and then read it. And then I'm pulling quotes out of stuff all the time and sending tips to people. And I read this thing in a book, and this quote really resonated with the situation we're currently in, and that kind of stuff. I do that a lot.
I found actually kids, you got a son and a daughter, I found that they're quite refreshing. Maybe they're bookworms as well, but just their basic natural wisdom comes through when I take something, I overcomplicate it. Like you said, a nonfiction book or a leadership book, and then they just said, "Why don't you just call them now?" And you look at them and you realize they're telling you something direct, sincere, and you could have just caught it all out by giving a phone call to the person. You go, "Damn, why am I reading this? Not this encyclopedia just to the same point."
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. the same thing. The perspectives are great, and especially so they're 18 and 13 now, and so the relationship changes, the older that they get, and so you can have some of these just different conversations, and they're in a different, the way that they grow up, have been growing up, is so different than the way that I grew up and my husband grew up, that just some of the things that they're much wiser than I was at their ages. They've just
Mm.
seen more, and done more. We didn't have the opportunities that they have today, and so like they've seen and done more things, and seen more diversity and people, and gone places that I never had a chance to go until I was an adult, and they've been doing since they were 5, 6, 7 years old.
I meet a 12-year-old. I have a niece who's 13, and the wisdom in her ability to do so many different topics at that age. I was a right dummy even at 17, just because you're saying what they're exposed to, and they expect children to be much more. They're capable of so much more at such a young age. And I think, like, I feel so just deprived when I talk to her. She's like a super adult at
Yes,
that age.
yeah, which is amazing and also kind of sad. Like at the right, I mean, you still need to be a kid, and you still need to. There's still, at least there's still some naiveness there, and there's a little bit of that. But I think you mentioned like there's so much expectation, and sometimes I think it's too much expectation. You still need to be able to like still be a kid.
Well, on a serious point, one of the things about kids that I see, especially American kids when I meet them, they are very capable with money and business concepts. So I don't know whether or not it's programs run in the college or whether or not it's just the exposure to the business world. They're very aware of entrepreneurship and how
Mhm.
to set up a business and get things going. It's like built into the DNA. Is that what you've noticed?
Not specifically with my kids, but I do know some kids that are like that. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Some of those, yeah, that the ideas and the fearlessness of just going for it. Like they'll just do
Yes.
it and have it
Failure's
figured
not a
out.
failure. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I love the idea that well, maybe not to not fail fast, but to just see everything as a stepping stone to get to the next point.
Hmm.
Coming back
Yeah.
to your own personality, Jill, when you were younger, did a certain person or a incident drive you towards technology, or did that happen by accident?
That was totally by accident. I was, like I mentioned with books, the first time I was in college, I was going to be an English major because I loved books and I like to write, and that just seemed like where I wanted to be. And
Yes.
the university that I went to actually offered, some technology classes. I never took any of them unless they were required. We used computers back then, where we used them, but it was more of a means to an end than anything. And so, yeah, it was totally by accident. When I started, I came into technology as a temp. Like I was routing support calls as a temp. And so I didn't know, like, it was an financial reporting software. We were using all of these different, types of technology. And so it was a total accident. And once I started kind of getting into it a bit more and realizing it wasn't necessarily about the technology, it was about the people and talking with
Mm.
customers. And I was talking with customers all over the world and learning about their businesses and why they were having problems with things. It was just super interesting to me and just kept going.
Yeah, it's interesting with talking with customers. Did you have a natural sense of figuring out, the noise and then figuring out that bit that is something that needs to be fixed? How did you separate it out?
I I don't know if it's because of I consider myself an introvert. I'm a listener and an observer a lot of the time, and I notice voice changes, I notice facial changes. I can read people pretty well and can tell when something is, important, something is wrong, and I can, ask questions and dig into that. So as it wasn't hard to be able to do that, to understand this is
Let's
what
just summarize it. Yeah.
to summarize it. And that's still something that I get used today. Like, that's what we do as product managers, is we're talking with customers and partners, and we're trying to figure out, market wise and all of these things that we want to be able to help our help our customers be successful, you have to sift through all of the some of the noise around that and then be able to translate that into something that
Yes.
an engineer can build. So it's something that I've always had a knack for. Like I said, I think it's just because I was always kind of in a corner observing and was learning people's expressions and understanding where they were coming from.
Yeah, there's levels also. When someone says they want a particular feature fixed, I know, like in my own software development, you have to keep going deeper and deeper till you find the actual root cause, and then you make your own, I guess, determination how the
Mhm.
process can be changed, rather than fixing this little box. They just want a tick box somewhere, and you go,
Yep.
no, 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 the real cause is down here. Did you find that easy enough to do, or was it something that you learnt this translation capability?
At first, it wasn't something that I knew how to do, but the more people that you talk to and the more you interact and kind of understand some of the processes, you start getting to that. And it's absolutely the same thing. Like when people ask, what it is that we do, and it's not just about, like you said, a checkbox or a button. It's about understanding the core problem that you're trying to solve. That, like, what is the main thing that is causing you not to be able to complete what it is you want to do, a pain point, a challenge, whatever. And once you get to that, then that's the part to me that's fun. But the more fun part is trying to figure out how to solve it, and solve it in a way that isn't going to fix, that isn't just for that one person, but is going to solve it for everyone that may have a similar or the same problem. And that's the creative part. That's the creative part to me is also super fun. Just when you see and you deliver something that solves their problem in a way that they didn't know, and probably isn't just that one piece, it's the entire process gets solved. That's exciting. That's fun stuff.
Well, on that path, I've been learning about first principles. Is that something you've used? And have you used, like OpenAI to walk through the five whys of getting down to the first principles?
I haven't.
Oh,
I haven't done.
okay. So let me share with you one.
Yeah.
Like it might be you might say, I, I don't want to pay full price for D365 FNO license, right? And then what OpenAI will do is walk you through, well, why do you have to pay a full price, a price for a full license? And then it kind of turns out that there are many modules and features. It says, why haven't you considered the alternative licensing arrangements? And it walks through five questions, each digging deeper into the problem. And the ultimate conclusion is that the person didn't know that wasn't educated on the different levels of licensing and the way you can split out modules, and therefore they were just defaulting to the easy option of ticking the box that says give them full price. And
Oh,
so
yeah, no,
it
I've used
helps
it.
to
Yeah.
it's a great way to take a customer statement, and then it goes boom, 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 boom. 5 questions later, it goes, and here's the likely cause of that misunderstanding at that top level. So I was just using it on the weekend.
Yeah. I am going to try that. I'm going to use that. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, coming back to the way that you distill information, I was reading about you, and there's this one line that shocked me. I'd love to know more about it. It says, when I'm designing a new piece of software or transforming a piece of furniture, and then
Yeah.
went click, my passion is to create the same. Tell me about furniture in the middle of your digital life.
Well, I like to take things that are maybe old or not functioning the way that I want them to function and just change the way that they work. Whether that is, taking a bar cart and turning it into a nightstand, taking a credenza from a hotel and turning it into or an office and using that as, like an entertainment center. Like, what are the thinking about the different ways that these different types of furniture or anything really, a vessel of any kind, anything can be a vase for flowers. Anything
Yes.
can be a flower pot. Anything can be something to use for storage. Like, how can I rework some of these things with the stuff that I already have? Or, I find something that's super interesting and change it and use it the way that makes the most sense for me, my family.
It sounds exactly the skills that you need to have if you're a consultant with, say, Microsoft Dynamics, where
Yeah.
you have this. all these configurable items, and you need to be able to go into a customer and go boop, 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 and
Yep.
that'll work now, no code.
Yes.
Maybe it's a skill we need to teach people to actually work with a Bachelor of Arts and do creative thinking this way and in the analog world, so they can come back and find the same principles in the digital world.
Yeah. I mean, it's transferable. Those
Yes.
skills are transferable. Absolutely. Yeah. You have to
So
be in these roles. You have to be creative. You can't things aren't in a box, and they're not anymore. It used to be a little bit different, but now with the way everything kind of changes, you can't just this is the way that it works and this is all that it's going to do. You have to be able to think creatively and make things work for you and for customers and all that.
in my past, with the way we always solved problems was to get into coding. If a customer told me they had something they needed to do, I didn't default down to the method that you said. I would say, oh, I could just fix this with a bit of code. And obviously, that client then became attached to me, and I could never move on with my life because I acquired baggage. And I
Yeah.
ended up being weighed down by all these clients. And what Dynamics does for me is it lets me release them to the world of standardization. And I almost make them feel bad for not following the Microsoft way because it releases them, staff, being caught on a particular process and being stuck in a certain model that they can never change.
Yep.
Tell me,
Yeah.
tell me about the journey into the IT industry and how it led you to your Microsoft aha moment, where you actually said, I think I need to be there.
It, I didn't. That moment didn't happen. Like I mentioned earlier, I went into a company as a temp, and that company was called FRX Software, and it was a
Yes.
financial reporting software. And then it was acquired by Great Plains out of Fargo. And I didn't live. I lived in
GP.
Denver, GP. I didn't live in Fargo at the time. I was living in Denver, and GP was actually there was Great Plains accounting classes that were given at the university that I went to the first time. So the university in my hometown had Great Plains accounting classes. I'm like, there's no way I'm taking an accounting class. This isn't what I want to do. So it was really ironic that that's where I ended up working. And so, yeah, we were acquired by Great Plains, and a year later we were acquired by Microsoft. And so that's really how, and I've been here ever since. It's been 26 years with, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
And what 2 points are raised when you're learning to drive, we're taught never to look at the curve because that's where you're going to hit. You can't say, I don't want to hit that, I don't want to hit that because you'll hit it.
yeah.
And secondly, isn't it funny how IT people always shorten things? So you'd be JC rather than Jill. Do people call you the great JC?
I have a really good friend that she calls me JC. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so you've now arrived on the cusp of your Microsoft career, 20 years, I guess, in Microsoft. But what was the old Microsoft compared to the new? Because there's a generation change happening across the world, right?
Mhm.
How did it feel then and now?
Much more collaborative now than then. We're seeing, working across, I'm talking with teams that I would probably would have never talked with before. How can we bring solutions across Microsoft to a customer? Because altogether, we're much more, it's going to sound cheesy, but we're much more powerful together than we are in separate
Yes.
pieces, right?
Yes.
We're way better together than we are in silos. And the old Microsoft, if I can use those
Mm.
terms, it
Yeah.
was very much siloed. It was, where this organization is doing this one is doing this. They could have been doing the same things. Who's going to get there faster? And now
Mm.
it's like, let's get there together faster and let's get there, go together. And it's a much better solution. We culturally, it was interesting because coming in through an acquisition, we were, a wholly owned subsidiary for quite some time. And so we were a bit insulated. We still had a CEO, we still had, our leadership team. It wasn't until, 5, 6, 7 years after the acquisition that we started then, you know, the redundancy ended up happening where we already had marketing, we already had customer support, and it, ended up those folks were moving into other organizations within Microsoft. And then on the engineering side, we kind of got, to be honest, didn't know what to do with us. Like we were this financial reporting package. Were we in business solutions? We were in office at one point, and then we came back to business solutions. What are we going to do with it? So there was some of that before we landed in the dynamics space, and that's where it's been ever since. So it's very interesting, the just the shift. When you're early in career, you don't, I probably was a little bit naive. I didn't know, that I thought this was how all big businesses worked, like all the competition and the all of those, kind of cultural things. And now when I'm hiring, and I'm hiring folks that are, right out of college or early in career, they're expecting inclusivity, they're expecting flexibility, they're expecting to have work-life balance. That stuff didn't exist. We did, it was marathons, and it's like we're gonna hard charge till the end. And does that happen sometimes? Yes, but it's not the norm. And there's a lot of space for people to be able to do what they need to do. So it's a very different, just culturally, from what it was, 20 years ago.
Is there like a voting system that you get when you're dealing with many different earlier silos? So say you had the Azure team and you have yours, and you might have maybe the broader Dynamics team. When you decide on your roadmap for where things are going, do you have to weigh things? I'm thinking of one particular example where HR got reintegrated back into D365
Mhm.
infrastructure. And for me, and say I'm thinking of all your function points that you want to introduce, you have your own priority list, and then there's this Azure team going, yeah, we have to put it back in to the infrastructure. And you go, stop, give me some time. But then eventually they have to have that priority because it's strategically the right thing for you.
Mhm.
So how do you determine these priorities?
It's hard, and
Yeah,
it's a lot of discussion. There
yeah,
are, like that, there's we always look to, back to the overall mission of the organization all up. Like, what are the things that we can do to empower, everyone on the planet to achieve more, right? That's how can we do that? And what does that look like? And when it comes to then the priorities of things, across each one of the, executive leadership team down to, my leadership team and my peers, we're always looking across. How can we do things in such a way that we can move forward and stay aligned? It's an alignment thing more than anything. And we have to make trade-offs. It could be that we really want to do this one thing now, and the team that we're collaborating with has gotten, other priorities from other teams. And they're like, we can't do it this semester, but you'll be number one next semester. Okay, then we need to adjust. Okay, if we can't get it this semester, then what are the things, other things on our list? And we have to be agile. We do continuous planning. We're always looking at, okay, if we need to shift, we've got changes coming in this area that are coming in either later or sooner than we thought, let's make some shifts. And so it's a lot of balance. It's a lot of hard conversations. It's a lot of compromise. Even this is really important to us, and these aren't going to get there. Can we help? Can we offer resourcing? Can we have to help you get there? And that also happens as well. Like, we collaborate across teams. If there's something that we need another team to build for us, can we check in code to your repos? Can we help there and help you get to where you need to be? And so that collaboration is super key.
it seems like you're very calm on the surface. You go home in the evening. What are the things that you wake up midnight and go, I really can't sleep. I need to get that fixed. I
Um,
mean, you might not be able to talk to me about it, but
I am I have a busy family, and so usually
okay.
after work it's all family stuff. And I
Yes.
really don't I fall asleep, and I sleep like a rock most of the time. The things that
Wow.
wake me up in the morning, or like in the middle of the night, or if I, forgot to do something. I forgot to send a mail that I promised I would send. Those are the things that get to me, is
Yes.
I didn't follow up with someone I said I was going to. Like, that's the stuff that wakes me up. Do we have certain things that we need to do? Yes. Do they keep me up at night? Not usually, because it's something that we need to work through. It's when I've said I was going to do something and I didn't do it, those are the things that will wake me up in the middle of the night.
Was that your mum or your dad instilling that sense of personal accountability into you, or an uncle or an auntie? Someone made you feel that if
Yeah,
you said something, deliver.
probably my parents.
Yeah.
I think I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I'm a middle child, so that part kind of comes in to that as well. But yeah, I really, when I say I'm going to do something, I do my best to do it. And when I also then have high expectations. So if someone does not communicate with me, the flip side of that, I get upset. when someone says they're going to do something and then they don't follow through, or they don't communicate, that they can't do something. The expectation setting is big with me.
You make me feel concerned now. I better not say anything. I better not commit to anything in front of you because it's do it, Chris. I'll say things like maybe I'm considering this, Jill. I'm
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
considering
No,
developing a
it's all
system.
about communication. Like, because you say something and it doesn't happen doesn't isn't a bad thing. It's like, hey, I said I was going to do this. I'm not going to be able to. Like, let's reset expectations. Like,
Ah,
that's
that's true.
that's the thing. Resetting
Minor
expectations.
course corrections, right
Yes.
during the conversation. Yeah, rather
Yes.
than arriving and you go, "Where's the ship?" And I go, "I was going to build it." Anyway, so Mike Tyson says that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. You have this great plan, this roadmap for HR.
Mhm.
Tell me about generational or AI, and tell also about social media. So, for example, LinkedIn, how how your product may have gone this way, but because now the arrival of these two, you have to keep swerving it and accounting for it.
It's constant. It's a constant adjustments being made. Honestly, on the HR side, the generative AI, a lot of the, co-pilot capabilities, and even some of the, autonomous things that are happening really are good things on the HR front. Like the HR, systems in general, and some of the process, I shouldn't say systems, processes are very guided. Like these are all of the things that need to happen when an employee gets hired. These are all the things that need to happen through an employee's life cycle. And these are all the things that need to happen when an employee separates from the organization. And so really generative AI, autonomous things really tie nicely into those. And so for us, it's about how can we think about some of those processes? Where are the places that we know we can remove redundancy, remove toil from, whether it's an employee, a manager, an HR business partner, whoever that may be, and look through that. And it's things that have always been in the back of our mind, but we just haven't had I don't think the clarity or the real focus to be able to go do them. Like we've been talking about some things, related to, hire to retire, and how can we help make this process more efficient for a long time. And
Yes.
we just haven't had like I said, either the technology to support it or the real focus to go after it. And so that really has been helping. On the LinkedIn side, it's really, interesting for some of them. It's not just even LinkedIn, it's modern work. It is, Teams, it's Viva, it's all of these things are really influencing how organizations think about talent management and how they're looking at that. And so we just need to make sure that we are, keeping up with that, making adjustments as we need to, working with those teams, understanding. It goes back to your question on, roadmap and things coming in, understanding where they're going so we can make sure that we're aligning where it makes sense, provide feedback when we can in different areas, because we also have, expertise on the operational administrative side of HR that is, necessary with all of the talent management pieces as well. So it's fun. I love this space so much. Yeah.
I can see, well, this is not a feature request, but I did notice that, say, with the Microsoft applicant booking system, that they let you use LinkedIn, for example, which is a great time saver of having to do a resume. And in the
Yep.
HR module, you can put in your skills and your certificates. Wouldn't it be cool, Jill? You could just say, look at my LinkedIn, and then that way, done. And then
One of
everyone gives their URL.
Yes, it would be. It would be. Here's the challenge: is a lot of
Okay.
organizations have a library of skills and certificates that may not match
Ah,
what you're putting in LinkedIn.
true.
And so how then what do we do? Then it's how do we match? How do we tie those two things together? I absolutely
Yes.
agree. There's a little bit of a nuance there though on how we think about bringing that data, kind of some of that unstructured data to the structured data that is in an HR system.
Yes. Everything that you do is very interesting, but now we've arrived at the most interesting point, customer advisory boards. So
Yes.
Henry Ford said, if I ask people what they want, they'd ask for a faster horse and cart. Steve Jobs says, don't ask the customer. So maybe you go down in history, Jill says, ask the customer. Or is there a better phrase I could put for the history books?
we wouldn't be where we are without the customer.
Yeah.
So, for me, I love talking with customers. I love hearing about their businesses. We get an opportunity to hear about all kinds of different organizations, their missions, their, where they want to grow their people, how they think about growing their employees, all of that. And so all of that, like without them, we wouldn't we wouldn't exist. And so understanding their problems and challenges and also their, how they're winning and their successes, both all of that together is how we can, inform what we're building, also help other customers understand the value of certain things. One of this last week we had customer advisory board, and
Mm.
one of the customers I was talking with, she's like, it would be great if I could have a like virtual user group to learn best practices from other people that are using your application.
Yes.
Because for me, I may be doing something and it's fine and it's working, but there might be someone else is doing it differently and better.
Yes.
And I may not know all of the ins and outs of the application that someone else does. And so just that sense of community also is super important. And yeah, I love it. I've met so many interesting people. I've gotten to go to so many interesting places and learn about that for me, I just customers are it.
Your listening skills, is there something that we can teach or you can share with us to help others when you're talking with customers? How do I stop talking and I let you, the customer, take me to that place, that problem space, and explain it in greater detail? Whereas I've already got some paradigms of how I'm going to solve your problem, and I need to push that aside,
Mhm.
listen more. You do that.
You ask the question, what else?
What else?
What else? So, they're explaining their problem. And instead of I think a lot of times what we try to do is come up with a solution. We're thinking of the solution as they're talking instead of listening to what the actual problem is. And it goes back to what you mentioned earlier with OpenAI and the five principles or the one
Yeah.
principle, and ask
Yeah.
questions. So you ask them a question like, what is the biggest challenge you have with your hire to retire process? And someone, they start talking. And then you say, what else? What else? And it's amazing, and the other piece is, I will say, is get comfortable with awkward silence.
Yes.
It takes people a minute
Yes.
to think through that. And I'm one that I know exactly what to say after I've hung up the phone or after I have, walked away from someone. And so you have to be comfortable sitting for multiple seconds, like not 2, maybe 10, maybe even 30. And you have to get comfortable with the awkward silence. And so you ask your what else question, and then you sit and you stay quiet.
I could practice now. I can't. I can't do it for more than a few
Yeah.
seconds.
Right?
So it reminds me of the movie line, and then
Mhm.
you just.
Yep. Yes.
It sounds like you're trying on purpose to poke them to themselves go deeper into it, because whatever they said first would just get it off my anger off my chest.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so then you get this information. You have to obviously try to translate that to
Yeah.
engineer speak and then business benefit. This is business benefit for Microsoft because I'm assuming you get a million requests. Is there a filter that says, well, this could apply to the maximum number of customers, therefore it ought to be high up?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah,
Yeah. There's definitely some of that. It's especially what you is the more customers you talk to and you have that conversation with, and you get down, you start to see themes. And so once you bring those themes together, whatever it may be, we've got a theme around employee data. Maybe that's what the theme is. That's what it's coming down to, is it's hard for people to, extract employee data and get the insights out of it that they need. Maybe that's what the theme is. Maybe there's a theme on identifying top performers. They're having a problem identifying top performers. Maybe that's a theme that you hear from multiple people. And so you definitely take those themes. And then it's really a matter of breaking down, when you talk about translation and then business value, it kind of, you're going almost not opposite directions, but you need to break down the problem, but then you also need to show where it will take the business, where could
Yes.
take, the application, and where to go. And so that's really where those themes come from. And you tie that with market research. You tie that with, we talk with analysts quite a lot. And so we're getting information from there, and you bring all of that together to create your business value story. And then the translation is really, this is what the user journey is. This is what it is that they're doing. And we try to then inject into the expected results. When they complete this task, this is what they expect to get at the end of that. And
Hmm.
obviously there, you can go into like a lot of detail. I remember back in the day, we used to have these humongous, like 50, 100-page requirements documents. We don't do that anymore, but we do have, these are the user stories. They want to accomplish this. And the way that they
Yes.
do that is, here's the acceptance criteria. And then we iterate and we get feedback. And we're talking with customers on, okay, this is the idea that we had to solve whatever the theme is. And we talk with customers and get feedback. Does this resonate with you? And that's another great opportunity for listening, is not asking leading questions, because you can say, they'll ask a question on, well, does it do this? And the question back is, what would you expect it to do? And make them kind of explain what they're expecting it. And if it's not what they expect it to do, then you keep asking that question. Well, this doesn't seem like it would fit into our process, or these are, the way that we do things here. And you get enough of that, and you're able to then continue to translate and refine some of that. But it's very iterative, very iterative. It's not the waterfall, throw requirements over the wall, engineering goes and builds something and throws it back. That doesn't happen anymore. It can't. We can't be agile enough, and we can't, get enough feedback that way.
Mm. I was watching a podcast last night, and they speak of fashion and babies' names, for example, and they talk about cycles where if you want to introduce something new, for it to be successful, you have to also thread in something old. And some examples of this is, say, Steve Jobs wants to release a personal digital assistant, doesn't work, the Newton, but when it's called an iPhone and it has the ability to do something that's very familiar, it's that bridge that a person can pick their mind. So a digital device like the iPad reminds us of the concept of writing onto a pad. Have you found themes with introducing new processes that you have to keep referring back to physical objects or things that are familiar to the HR team so that they feel comfortable adopting Microsoft's best practice?
That's a great question, and think I don't think that I
Do-
have.
Are you leading people to a certain nirvana, Ed, that we don't know yet, but you're taking us down this path?
I mean, obviously, a lot of it comes back when you're from a digital perspective, is think about the file cabinet that you had behind you that was
Yes,
full of employee files in
yes.
manila envelopes, and each one was a piece of paper. So
That's a,
that
that's the exact example. Perfect. Yes,
yeah, that's the example. You now have all of this, but there's still paper. We still have a lot of
yes,
paper. And it's interesting because, like, for me, I don't do anything really on paper anymore. And so when I have to print something or sign something, I get annoyed. Like, if I can't do it online, because I sit at a computer all day long, and if I can't do it online, then it's annoying to me. But that's not the way that it is for some folks. It's that, when you have to, I remember talking with my sister. She's an HR professional, and she would have timesheets in paper land on her desk, like within the last, however, 5, 6 years. And I was like, what in the world? And she's like, yeah, I know, paper. And so it's that
yeah,
shift. Think about, you don't have to manage all of that paper anymore. It's very easy to find. You're able to
yes.
quickly look up whatever it is that you need to look up, because it's all in a single spot. It's, digitally you can search it. There's so much technology now that can help you with that. Even, OCR scanning and bringing in some of that piece as well is helpful.
I was talking to a client, they are referring to the age-old problem of onboarding.
Oh
And
yeah.
I remember another client, they actually did a thing called, oh, well, they called it pre-boarding, right? And so they
Yep.
got us to develop the system that they hired someone, there's 2 weeks, a month before they come on board. And they actually sent them the onboarding pack ahead of time and said, if you do this, you'll get a day off when you arrive in lieu of the effort you're going to do, at home. And so they ended up with all of their candidates doing that. So they arrived at work knowing exactly the processes for the business, the people they're working with, and their job. They were literally like, day one, first hour, and start work. Have you seen those sorts of processes being talked about and imagined? Or is it a case that onboarding is still something being grappled with? No one's figured it out.
Everyone is still grappling with it. Yep,
Yes.
everyone's still grappling with it. It's in some cases, like it's awesome that that particular customer was able to do that. A lot of times they don't even know if someone's going to show up on the first day. Like
Yes.
that's what people are seeing is that we've made an offer, we've gone through some of the pre-boarding. They print off a folder on their first day and they have to go through and they fill all this out. And so there's been some that they don't even know that someone's going to start until they, show up and hand them their folder. And that is also happening, around the globe, I think. And we had a similar discussion at our customer advisory board last week around the paper, and a lot of it is regulatory. Governments are
Yes.
still, requiring paper forms. And so, like, even from a reporting perspective, you have to fill out a form in a certain format, and that then has to
Yes.
be electronically or mailed or scanned or whatever. So there's still, until we get on the regulatory side, we're still going to have some of that challenge and that struggle. So I think that we may get there, but I've been thinking that we would have gotten rid of paper a long time ago, and it still hasn't happened.
Yeah. It's like you'll have a forever job.
Yeah.
It'll never be solved. What about contracting? So a lot of the features inside the HR module refer to employees. I understand that's where maybe there's a legal focus. Contractors, do they start to come into this in the future?
There is the ability to have contractors today. The main difference
Okay.
between an employee and a contractor is the contractors are typically, don't go through payroll, it's through invoices. But there's ability
Yes.
to have contractors. I think we'll see more of that, just generally speaking. There's the gig economy and gig
Yeah.
workers, and we manage some of that a bit more. And that I think comes along with some how we rethink some of the processes when it comes to hiring and managing some of those different types of employee groups. But it's definitely has been top of mind as well. Like contractors are there, but I think that we definitely have some improvement that we can make to help manage some of those more, holistically moving forward.
Yes. With your presentations that you do at the customer advisory board, what is the latest big thing that you're thinking about or presenting?
So, typically when we really want to focus on getting feedback from them. And so what
Yes.
we do is we focus on a business process. And then we just ask a bunch of questions about the business process. Instead of us presenting and doing all of the talking, those customer advisory boards are a chance for them to really give us feedback on where it is that we're building, and give us feedback on how we can help improve their processes. Obviously, this last customer advisory board, a lot was around Copilot. Like, what are the things that we can help from an autonomous perspective? How can we, help make you more efficient in your job, get data easier, all of those kinds of things. And so that was a lot of the main focus. We also talked
Mm.
a bit about we have a recruiting add-on coming for Dynamics 365 Human Resources. So it's in private preview right now. And so we talked a bit about that and some of the plans that we have from a Copilot perspective for that moving forward.
So digitizing the process of the recruitment. Okay. Very interesting because I do see that gap and it hasn't been solved, even though I know there's a link to ATS inside HR.
Right.
Um, yeah. Okay, that's great. Tell me about your co-chair of the business apps, platform teams, allyship community. HR tends to lead the way in awareness. I don't know. Teach me about office housework. What is that?
Office housework are the
And
things like,
yeah,
yeah. So
and
the
benevolent sexism. Sorry.
Yeah. So when we think within Microsoft, we have employee resource groups. And for each type, each employee, resource group has their own mission and their own objectives. And the allyship community, what we're really there for is to support any of those groups however we can. And there's a lot of cross kind of ERG, when you think about how people identify, they cross multiple of those ERGs, and how can we make sure that we're supporting some of that. We were lucky enough to have Karen Catlin come in from Better Allies and do a session for us, and one of the topics was around office housework. Think about office housework as the note taker, the meeting scheduler, the coffee
Yes.
getter, all of those kinds of things. And a lot of times
Yes.
in certain organizations, that ends up falling to whoever the female is in the room.
Yes. Yes.
And a lot of times there's only one of us.
Yes.
And that's who it ends up falling to. And so it's really around how can we, rethink some of those things. Now that it's virtual, it's not as, you don't the coffee getting and some of that, but there's still, a lot of times I have found myself mumbling under my breath, "I'm not your admin." Not that
Yes.
there's anything wrong with being an administrative assistant, but I'm not an administrative assistant.
It's when it's being
So,
handled twice, right? Someone says, go
yeah,
do this, and you go, you could have easily pressed the button yourself.
yes. Yep.
It actually not only doubles the work, but it also, I know, steals away time from that individual.
Yeah.
And they're always capped in where they go. Okay. And then benevolent sexism.
Benevolent sexism is really around making assumptions about what someone needs without actually asking them. One of the examples that is given, and even I, I'm a mother and I work full
Yes.
time, and those kinds of things. Well, they aren't going to be able to do that because they have a child at home. Well, don't make that assumption. I may have help. I may have figured out my schedule. Those kind, that kind of thing is really what that is all about. And really at the end of the day, it's all about just asking people. Don't make assumptions
Yes.
about what people need or want. Just ask.
Yes.
And if you make a mistake, that's fine. Just say, "Oh, I made a mistake," and own up to it. And how can I ask the question, how can I do better?
I also feel, just hearing what you're saying, that how would I feel in that position, right? Taking aside gender, it's just as a human being, how would I feel if I'm not being asked or not being included in the decision making? So for
Sure.
yourself, y- I looked at the job role titles that you've had, and I laughed because it's so corporate-y to say you're a program manager, and they go, "We want to give you a bonus for doing great, Jill. You're a senior project manager." You go, "That's fantastic." And then they go, "What can we give her after this?" And you go, "Principal product manager," right? And
Mhm.
so you obviously keep growing in stature and the ability to manage more things. Are you at a stage, or will you be at a stage that you become a monk and you say, I need to go back to my roots, find who I am and become this deeper wisdom? Or do you feel there's still more steps that you can give to a broader role, a more strategic role?
That is the ultimate question. Some days I feel like I want to go back and really like be a monk, and some
Yes,
days like there's so much more I could do. And
yes,
so it just depends on it's a both. It's not an either or, it's a both and it's, depending on the day. Some days I'm a bit more introspective. Other
yes.
days I am let's go, let's do this. There's so much more that we have to do. And it ebbs and flows. And yeah, like that's where a lot of the, like when I mentioned I'm reading and leadership and all of those, that's kind of the more introspective. How can I help my team? How can I help my customers? How can I help my family? How can I help my community? Like, what are the things that I can do? And that's really where the introspective part comes from. And then I
Mhm.
get talking with customers and I start hearing what they have going on and having conversations. I was like, we have so much to do. There is so much more impact that we can have. And then that energizes me in a different way. So it depends on the cycle that I'm in and where I'm at.
Who you're in front of, because I can
Yeah,
see
I'm in front of.
the energy comes into you.
Yeah.
And so the roadmap for the HR product, the module,
Mhm.
what are the key milestones that we're seeing in the next 12 months?
Yeah, what we're looking at, like I mentioned, is our recruiting add-on is a
Yes.
major piece of investment that we're making right now. And so we'll see that over the next, we're phasing it into 3 different phases. So we'll see some of the core capabilities come, and then we'll continue building on each of those core capabilities. We're also continuing on our looking at how we can integrate with other payroll providers as well. And so
Yes.
how can we help kind of bridge that gap, having those discussions, brainstorming different ways for us to really provide that capability to organizations. We also have some things coming on the benefits management front
Mhm.
to help improve not only the employee enrollment experience, but also the benefits administration experience. And I would expect to see a lot of co-pilot coming and autonomous types of processes that we're looking at adding.
Benefits management. I
Mhm.
noticed that, like in my simplistic view, I only understood it as being like your salary, but are you referring to all aspects like work from home arrangements, maternity, paternity leave? What are the other things that I'm missing? Healthcare, for example.
Yeah, it's
What are
all
the
that's
bits of,
yeah. Benefits management is really what we've noticed is a lot in United States because it's healthcare, it is, dental, it
yes,
is, some of the leave and absence in a lot of cases is considered a benefit for some organizations. It could be, work from home. It could be if you have like a perks program where you get reimbursement
yes.
for, you know, health care or like
Yeah,
exercise equipment,
gym, for example. Yeah.
gym, all that kind of stuff. So that's benefits management. And here in the US, typically in the October, November timeframe, because most of our healthcare benefits kick in on January 1st, we have an open
Yes.
enrollment period in October and November where we go in and we choose. And it's, life insurance, your flexible spending accounts, your healthcare spending accounts, your healthcare benefits, all of that you then go and enroll in.
I know, like switching then to payroll, one of the big
Mhm.
things we have when we're integrating all of these modules is that this payroll's always out here, they're duplicating processes that
Yeah.
HR has the information. Is that something that's a priority? And are people mentioning that to you?
Not necessarily mentioning it. Like when we think about integration, we're sending across, the HR, the names, addresses, base salary, all of, benefit
Yes.
deductions, all that kind of stuff, and then allowing the payroll system to do all the processing of that payroll. A lot
Yes.
of times the payroll is also the timekeeping system as well.
Yes.
So like
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff are entered in payroll as well. We we don't necessarily see a whole lot of good feedback on the duplication. Payroll is something everyone needs to do. And so and a lot of times we do have customers that are, especially if they're global, each country has its own rules around payroll, their own payroll providers that are used, and depending on what country they're in. And so there's really keeping that master in the HCM system is where a lot of folks want it to be. They don't
Mhm.
want to have, duplicate things. It's just only
Yes.
passed over there. The only thing that's done is processing, while everything else is still managed in the HR system.
Yes. And like you said, I see HR as being the last bastion almost of paper
Yeah,
in most business. And we're all cheering you on, Jill, to see that you get in there
right.
and flush it out, make it all
Yeah,
happen because that's it. We're then totally digital.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Jill, for taking the time to chat with us. We're approaching the end of our time. I really appreciate what you've done and sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the time today. It was great chatting with you.
Have a wonderful evening.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye, Jill.
Mobiz is a community-run organization. We believe in liberating people from the shackles of monotony, inspiring them to dream bigger and reach higher. We empower them to focus on the things that matter, growing their skills, solving new problems, and helping others on a global scale.
We eliminate manual work that stands between people and their future, preventing them from learning new technologies, unleashing their talents, and leaving a legacy that has a lasting impact.
Freedom doesn't wait. Join us at mobiz.com.